Good morning. I've been pointing out on my agenda, as you guys probably saw, and we'll continue to, reward you guys with participation for attending, because I like you to attend whenever I have live sessions. But I'm going to take a little bit off participation when we're doing something like reviewing a large section of a novel and people just don't attend and don't communicate. So glad you guys are here. If you're watching this as a recording, then please note and please come. Missing out on a lot of chance for participation, not only to be here, but to, kind of help us talk through this stuff too. So I will give these folks a couple more minutes. It looks fine, Roman. You're all good. Oh, there's one out of place right here. All right, that's 8:15. Probably ought to get started. All right, I haven't done a news L in a while, so I did put a new article up. If you could do that at some point today. Grammar parts of speech the test was due last night. There are some people who did not do that. That means those people have a 0 out of 20 on a test grade. So if any of those people are you, get that in as soon as possible. You gotta. I'm holding that rule, folks. You do something late, you gotta email me and let me know, or it's not going in there. Okay. Not gonna let you slip through the cracks. I will place a key later today, and you can submit corrections by tomorrow night. I want to get that done because then we'll have a vocab test at the end of the week, lesson 6. All right, the biggest thing going on right now, of course, is the final draft of your argumentative research paper, and that is due by tomorrow night. I went over what I've posted yesterday. If you haven't already, if you turn in that final draft and don't do a bunch of stuff that I talked in that video about, and you didn't watch the video, that is going to be a bad situation. And I'd love for everyone to do wonderfully because they watched the video and understood everything it's expected. It's the biggest grade of the quarter. It's a 100-point writing grade. So do a good job. And then finally, the study guide for part 2 of my assignment was due last night and has been checked, and we are going to go over that in class. I gotta come off my screen share here and let a couple more people in. Jackson, Steele. All right, better turn out. Okay, those of you who just joined in, I just went over the agenda, so make sure to take a look at it. And the most important point was make sure and watch the video about the rubric and the final draft for your research paper, which is due tomorrow night. So I probably won't make the next part of my assignment due until like Monday next week, because you guys need to concentrate on that paper. Give you a break for Friday. Okay. Let's see if you guys could access your work on part 2 of the book. Well, I get set up here. I believe I returned it. I don't know how much difference that makes when I return stuff or when I don't. I think you can access it either way, right? Usually I don't put grades on Google Classroom, but I do stuff like that because I'm going through and taking specific points off if people don't use quotes or if they don't write on the prompts very much or something like that. Bring that up. Everybody ready to talk? You gonna talk today? Gonna use your voices? Hit that unmute button. Are there some of you out there who have never unmuted yourself ever? I'm just curious. That's an interesting question, isn't it? Are you showing me that Ms. Schwabel's leaving the room, Roman? Is that what that was for? Is that relevant to me for some reason? Oh, now she's back. Hi, Ms. Schwabel. All right, you guys got your stuff up? Let me get my novel up here so I can maybe bring that up. Almost ready, guys, sorry. Okay. All right, can you guys see my novel text? Give me a head nod. Cool. All right, so you notice, in contrast to the beginning of the novel, it kind of depicted like this peaceful scene of nature, right? Curved shapes, beautiful sounds, natural things, right? And then you have these 2 humans come onto the landscape and we see their issues and stuff, but then where they have to go in order to get work and to exist is a very different description, right? The bunkhouse was a long rectangular building. Inside the walls were whitewashed and the floor and painted. The 3 walls there were small square windows and a 4th, a solid door with a wooden latch against the walls. It's very mechanical and square and rectangular and not natural, right? It's kind of setting a mood of, you know, feeling like they're not feeling like they're part of nature, but feeling like there's some kind of system that has taken the world to maybe not so good a place. Let me talk a little bit about the setting in general and the theme, and then we'll get into the questions. So during the Great Depression, you had these young guys, sometimes older, who were forced to, you know, either not have a family or to leave a family in some cases, and kind of travel the country alone searching for work. And that's what we see them start to struggle to do here, or continue to struggle to do, as far as what we're seeing. So we're in the rural West, right? It's a temporary job on a ranch. So there's like this impermanence and not very many physical belongings even or anything, right? And it kind of leads to a lot of isolation and kind of suspicion and even paranoia between people because, you know, when people are moving from place to place like that, you know, they can maybe get away with things and then just leave, right? And people are desperate, right? And what makes people take advantage of each other sometimes and commit crimes is when they're desperate, like when they're poor, right? I mean, that's where the majority of poverty comes from in general. So there's a lot of that going on, people taking each other's stuff, and it was hard to trust people, right? And you see that in the paranoia between the characters in this. So that kind of ties in with the whole theme, several themes, right? But mostly of loneliness, right? And how that kind of comes out of the setting. So George and Lenny, you know, they're on the ranch, they're isolated in some way. But then we start to see some characters break through that, right? And have some signs of hope. And so you've got the theme of loneliness, but at the same time, there's these themes of like glimpses of hope, right? And so the question is, where is this all going to lead? Is it going to lead, you know, down the road of everyone's suspicion and paranoia and loneliness and what kind of behavior that creates? Or are the glimmers of hope going to, you know, kind of win over? And maybe even is there a chance that George and Lanny will, you know, achieve or see that dream of that ranch and Lenny raising the rabbits and that hopefully not fantasy dream that they have, right? Okay, to the questions. So the first one was, many of the characters in the chapter seem to be scared of each other, as Slim puts it. What are some examples of characters who are suspicious of other characters and support transfer with evidence from the text? And let's respond with just maybe one example, and then someone else can give. Who's got one example? Kayla, go ahead. Thanks.
I said that the boss was suspicious of George. The text states, the boss turned halfway. Well, God knows he don't need any brains to buck barley bags. But don't you try to put nothing over Milton. I got my eye on you.
Yeah, both he and his son, Curly much worse, right? He's much more aggressive. But even the boss, his dad, they're suspicious of just the situation that George would go around with this, you know, mentally disabled, learning disabled, huge guy, and not be taking advantage of him. It's incomprehensible to him that someone would be selfless like that. And George is selfless, right? Like he's mean to him sometimes without meaning to, but he's doing this considerate thing. And here it makes people scared because it just doesn't seem right, right? Not that they try to protect Lenny or anything, but yeah, he's certainly suspicious. Okay, who else? There's probably like at least 3 or 4 different situations where we see that going on. Can someone give us one more? I can't necessarily see you raising your hand, so feel free to just speak up. I can see most of you. How about George? Doesn't he become suspicious of someone, even though they kind of later iron it out? Kaylee, go ahead.
I'm not sure if this is right, but I said that George is suspicious of Curly's wife, kind of.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's true. And that happens more toward the end. Yeah, and that's a whole weird situation we'll get into too. But yeah, sure. That's another example. Roman, what do you got?
George was suspicious of Curly because at the beginning when he thought he was going to fight him and get him kicked out, basically.
Okay. Any more subtle ones? See, now with Curly and Curly's wife, like they're suspicious, but it turns out to there's not really anything to it, right? So we're trying to look for maybe more examples of people being suspicious of people, and we, at least the reader, if not the characters later, see that there isn't a reason for that. Lauren, what did you have?
That George is suspicious of Candy.
Good, because what does Candy do? All he does is what, Lauren?
He just kind of like they think he was listening in on their conversation.
Yeah, and all he had really done was come in, right? And then when they sit and kind of like sort of get to know each other, George realizes he's a nice guy, and they kind of bond over both disliking Curly because he's so mean to everybody, and then they kind of realize, okay, these guys are okay. But it took you know, a little bit of bonding time to get past that initial paranoia. Any others? I think we kind of talked about how Curly is suspicious of Lenny and George as well as his dad was, with his cold glare and everything, and that's a lot more pointed and maybe even aggressive, right? Whereas the boss is more just kind of like, oh, that's strange, and I don't think I like that. But Curly seems to be a problem, right? Okay, in number 2 then. In chapter 2, George tells the boss that Lenny was kicked in the head by a horse and that he and Lenny are cousins. Is this information true? Why does George volunteer this information? Any evidence you have from the text? Ella Rayner.
Okay, so I put, no, this information is not true. George had made it up because he was trying to cover up for Lenny. On page 23, it states, be a good thing if you was, George said viciously. Save everybody a whole lot of trouble. This helps explain that George covered up for Lenny because of his past. Earlier in the story, we found out some of Lenny's weird tendencies and why they got kicked out of weed. That all relates with this. If George didn't lie and say something happened to him, then in the future, if Lenny did something out of line, there would be no explanation for it and they could lose their job or even worse.
Right. So the cousin thing at least gives some kind of explanation that would make some sense to them. He's trying to avoid trouble is all, right? And it's a shame that he has to do that. But yeah, okay. Pretty easy question there. Number 3. So let's describe Curly's personality and support your answer with evidence from the text. What are some adjectives we could use, like character traits that we could use to describe Curly? Any new hands out there? Making sure I'm seeing everybody here.
He is arrogant.
Is that Avion?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, arrogant. Anything else?
Confrontational.
Sure. Yeah, confrontational. Good word. Maybe kind of paranoid, right? Madeline?
I put that he's kind of like self-conscious in a way, that he's not as big as other people.
Yeah, which leads to him being insecure, and that is the classic trait for bullies underneath, right? When you see somebody like bullies other people, they're looking for someone who's easy to pick on, right? And somehow make themselves feel better about himself or herself, and that seems to be what Curly's doing. He's insecure about keeping track of his wife, the fact that he's a short, small guy, right? Supposedly a really good boxer. Who knows if that's true or not? But could be trouble for Lenny, George sees. All right, up to number 4. So despite the frequent tension and suspicion between the characters in this chapter, there are occasional indications that not everyone on the ranch is mean. To use Lenny's description, describe 2 examples of kindness in this chapter, and we can go one at a time on this too. You can give one example for number 4. Back to Ellen, go ahead.
Okay, so just one of them, I put an act of kindness that took place in this chapter is when the old guys, like the previous workers, welcomed Lenny and George. On page 35, it says, glad to meet you. A man named Carlson said this, and him and his buddy had just come, and they were both welcoming both Lenny and George, and they weren't being disrespectful, whereas like some of the other people had been to them.
Good. Both Candy and Carlson both seem to kind of welcome them eventually. Who's another person who holds a little bit more kind of respect and authority, who also is nice and respectful to him from the beginning?
The boss. The boss.
Is that Avion talking there?
Yes.
Now there's kind of 2 bosses. There's the overall boss who's Curly's dad, but then there's another guy who kind of holds authority that I think you might mean, but he has a different name. Kaylee, who's that?
Slim.
Yeah, Slim, who they call the jerk line Skinner. I can't remember exactly what that means, but he runs a lot of the, machinery and the livestock when they're out there doing what they do. It's not terribly important, but he's like a real life like cowboy or something, right? And he holds a lot of respect. Steinbeck takes a lot of time to describe him, in a lot of detail, and he's like all manly and but at the same time, he seems like a really gentle soul, right? So it seems like kind of a rarity in this world. Interesting character. All right. I think it was probably the main ones. Let's go on to 5. We're out of time. So what is Lenny excited about at the end of chapter 2? And if you could paraphrase what's going on with dogs in general, Steinbeck's, there's kind of a little side plot going there with it involves a couple of characters and dogs. Ella, go ahead.
So I put at the end of the chapter, Lenny is excited about possibly getting a dog. There was this other worker that had a dog that gave birth to puppies, and since there were so many, he decided to kill 3 of them. But obviously, Lenny wanted to try to save one, since you could tell he's a lover of animals. So in the text, it says, a brown and white one. You ask him right away, George, so he won't kill no more of them. This shows that Lenny has to be looking forward to maybe getting a puppy/dog, and that he is truly hurt by what the guy did, so he doesn't want it happening again to any of the other puppies.
Okay, so that relates to what Lenny likes, which is to have something soft and alive to pet, right? Because of his gentle nature. And there's also kind of this, and then there's also this idea of like having to put something out of its misery, right? I think he even said, I think Slimmy says that he had to drown 5 of them right away because there was like 9 of them, and they kept 4. I think those numbers are right. So that's interesting. And then they're going to put, they want to put Carlson's dog out of his misery, right? So that's brought up too. So because of that, they want to give him one of the puppies, and that's how Lenny hears about the puppies. And he looks at George, doesn't say anything. He's good. He's not supposed to talk very much. And so we're left with, all right, is Lenny going to get one of those puppies? I'm sure that's what the whole book is going to be about, right? But those are probably both, kind of symbolic, foreshadowing type things, about what you have to do sometimes and what you want and what you'll get or not necessarily get. So we'll continue to think about that. And the discussion prompt was, Lenny and George meet a lot of very different characters. Each of these new has the potential to influence them in a variety of ways. Choose 2 characters introduced in this chapter. Describe each character briefly and make a prediction. How do you think each of your chosen characters will influence Lenny and George's experience? Because that pretty much seems to be what's going on, right? I will give you double pluses for anyone who could just, you don't have to read the whole thing, but maybe just kind of share and paraphrase how you responded to that. If I do that, Avion, go ahead.
I chose Lenny. I put it was possible Lenny could. I don't. Let me read this. There was, and Lenny could possibly get some more before they kill. Wait. Oh, sorry. Wrong question.
Look at the discussion prompt at the end. So we're looking for how some of the other characters. There you go.
Slim is an outgoing and humble person. For example, once he noticed there were new people on the ranch, he introduced himself. So I think that he could be a great impact, like, to them and help them through like working at the ranch and stuff.
Yeah, good. He does. He's completely different from everybody else, right? Because he both has respect and he seems to be really nice and considerate, which seems to be kind of unique among those characters. Most of them seem to be, they're kind of like hiding and making sure nothing bad happens to them, or they're like bossing people around, right? Okay, good. Anybody else on that? Last discussion prompts. Kaylee?
I said Curly, and I said that Curly is extremely demanding and a bully, and I think he might try to hurt Lenny or George in the future because the text states his eyes flashed over George, took in his height, measured his reach, and looked at his trim middle.
Yeah, it's like he's like assessing them, and whether or not he could like take them or something. So yeah, and those kind of the characters on 2 opposite ends of the spectrum there. Curly seems to be like the worst of this world, and Slim seems to be the best. Okay, good enough. Thank you guys for being here and participating. Definitely be adding your points in at the end of this week, and you see where your participation stands. Keep working on that paper. Make sure to email me if there's anything that you still understand after watching the video. I'll be posting the next study guide, but again, it won't be due until at least Sunday night, if not later. I'll make a phone decision later. Have we got any questions about anything else before we go? All right. Thanks, guys. See you soon.